been super excited for this because, I don't know, there's all these questions. The fans are here. Okay. Nicole. Okay, Mitch, why don't you explain what area of the law you're most passionate about, what you end up focusing on the most, and obviously when it comes to Periscope, what's been top of mind?
Sure. Hey everybody, my name is Mitch Jackson. Absolutely love live streaming. Okay? Let's get that straight right now. And for 30 years we've been practicing litigation and trial work. As Alex Kahn said next door, anybody can press the red button. All Doug and I are going to share with you is before you press that red button, there's probably a couple of things you should know. Consider the context of the information being shared with you today. In 2009, I was named Orange County Trial Lawyer of the Year. In 2013, California Litigation Lawyer of the Year. So we come to the table with a lot of experience and hopefully we'll help you guys avoid unnecessary legal issues the next time you hit the red button on Periscope.
Hey, good evening. It's good to be here. This is my first Periscope Summit, and I'm impressed. I walked in, the number of people here and the excitement level is really off the charts. I'm happy to participate. My name is Doug Bend. I help out entrepreneurs. That's all we do. We have a law firm here in San Francisco, a half dozen of us helping out people like you, make sure that you don't get sued, and if you do, that you're in a good spot to take care of you and your business. Thanks.
Okay, I think it's going to be helpful to just go through a bunch of different examples and what do you do? So the first one is, I think, to your point about just pressing that red button, there's a lot of stuff happening around you, especially if you're just starting a broadcast at home. Like, for example, there might be music playing, or I'm sure this week with, another debate and a State of the Union, maybe people decided to go live and maybe show was on there. Mitch, maybe I'll ask you first. Copyright, that kind of stuff, should we be worried? Are we overthinking it if we're, too concerned about, whether there's a Stevie Wonder song playing or whatever?
Well, I'll tell you what, John, it's actually the law before live streaming still applies today. If you guys are live streaming with somebody else's photograph, video, music playing in the background, and you don't have that person's permission to use their content, it's probably copyrighted and it's probably not okay to use. There are some exceptions, the fair use doctrine. If you're using it as a news reporter, if you're using content to criticize, if you're using content under several different other areas under the category, then there may be some exceptions. It's a very complicated area of the law. What I always tell people is, although I am a lawyer, I'm not your lawyer, and so before using somebody else's content, make sure you've got their permission.
That's spot on. I think the best example I can think of is that there's been a number of lawsuits with politicians. They play the music as they're going out to the podium, and some of those musicians don't particularly like that politician that's using their song, and they sue that politician. So it's kind of a parallel there. You would think that it would be okay to play a really enthusiastic song and pump up the audience as you go out to the podium, and there's been a number of lawsuits about that, and the musicians are winning time and time again.
This is a true story. Very early in Periscope, I was having a conversation with a very high-level music executive who said, wow, this is great. Here's an idea. Let's get each of the people using this to license our content for the whole year. They can use any of the music in our library. And we're talking about probably a license that would cost about $250,000. So I guess my follow-up to what you guys said is, given how big of a gap there is between, is there, how fearful should you be of a company coming after you?
So the fact of the matter is, when I was preparing for the New York Summit, this question was asked, and I didn't come across a single case that was filed for copyright infringement. So it's not as though it's going to happen to you. We're just sharing with you before pressing the red button, understand what the laws are so you don't unnecessarily expose yourself to unnecessary risk. I will tell you that clients of ours who wanted to use another company's content reached out to that other company, explained what Periscope was, and the other company said, go for it. That sounds great. What a great way to amplify our message that we weren't even aware of. So oftentimes when you ask, you will get a positive response. So
I'm just gonna have to pass the mic so you're on the camera.
why don't we take questions if that's okay towards the end? And is that all right with you? Okay.
I think that's a good point. And so the question is, well, what do you do? And you have a few options here. You could get the permission of the musician, and it really depends on what music you're looking at playing. If you want to play Adele, that might be a challenge. You know, she may not be as responsive for getting back to you. She's really busy. But there's a lot of really good musicians, really good music, where they would love the opportunity for you to be promoting them on your Periscope. And so looking for friends of friends that are looking to get in the music industry and reaching out to them and using their music. Another good solution as well is there's a lot of open source public music that is you can use. And so I think if you think a little creatively, I think you can get some really good music on your videos and not have this be a problem.
We on Parachute created a song so we wouldn't have that issue, but other music sometimes slips in. Okay, there's a lot of great conversations at the Periscope Summit about building a business, using live streaming to enhance a business, but what about the legal perspective on that? Especially if, there's maybe a gray zone on, something being sold here. Doug, I know this is an area that you think a lot about. Maybe we'll start this one with you, about what you need to be communicating if ultimately you're using this more as a business platform and maybe selling something at the end of the day.
You bet. So we help set up over 50 companies a year, so we think a lot about this, and I think it's important to recognize that if you are sued, the defense isn't, well, it was a hobby. And so, the bigger impact you have, the more viewers you have, the more, if you're doing things that are dangerous, people might copy you. If you're doing things that could lead to litigation, and you have more and more viewers, there comes a point in time where you really have to take a look at that and think about setting up a legal entity, really to protect yourself. And thinking about, is this just a few viewers? Am I just talking about stuff that people aren't going to get upset or copy or maybe harm themselves? Maybe it's not that time, but the bigger impact you make, the more kind of dangerous stuff you're doing, the more likely you should get something set up.
As Doug said, we did a blog post about Sammy the Surfer. And Sammy the Surfer came out with a new surfboard with a digital device in the front of his surfboard, and GPS would tell him when new waves were coming in, so he wouldn't waste his time on bad sets. And what Sammy didn't realize is that this chip was making these surfboards catch on fire and burning up homes. This is a fictitious story, okay? But the deal is when Sammy was on Periscope promoting the surfboards, he'd come on and like, dude, Sammy here, buy my surfboards, right? And what ended up happening is Sammy got sued because when things went south and the product didn't work and burnt down homes, they sued Sammy as an individual. They didn't know that they were purchasing surfboards from Sammy the Surfboards Shop Incorporated. So the biggest mistake I see people make on Periscope is if you've got a business, small or large, when you start your scope, make sure you point out, and you can do it tactfully, make sure you point out you're scoping on behalf of your company and not as you as an individual. So that raises the question, if you're doing business and you're using Periscope, it's really smart, depending on what state you're in, to incorporate your business or to form an LLC to protect your personal assets from your business assets. So when you start your scope, you can come on and say, hey, it's Sammy the Surfboard King from Sammy Surfboards. How are you guys doing today? Today's scope's brought to you by Sammy the Surfboard King. Let's talk about riding the rails. So you need to make sure that you specify in your Periscopes that you're scoping on behalf of your business and not as an individual.
Yeah. And we should also point out that just because the scope has expired, although I think looking forward maybe they won't as frequently, but that doesn't mean that whatever you've done in the past, even if it's hard for someone to watch, that someone couldn't technically go back and dig that up and so on.
Yeah, the power of the subpoena is huge. Just because something disappears after 24 hours, it's on somebody's server someplace. So the bottom line is when you go live on Periscope or any other live streaming platform, even though whether it's a Snapchat, it's a Periscope, once it's gone, it can be found, it can be used against you. So think before you press live. Okay?
The only thing I'd add to that is we live in a society that's very litigation heavy. People love to blame other people for their problems. My favorite example, a couple years ago, there was a lawsuit filed in Southern California by a mom suing Chuck E. Cheese, claiming that Chuck E. Cheese was encouraging her kids to gamble through skee-ball. And so, a lot of times people say, how am I going to get sued? Well, I think lawyers, we kind of enjoy thinking up ways people can get sued, but you're probably more exposed there than what you might first think.
I don't enjoy suing people. What about kind of a similar topic, but things you say about people? There are moments when you're live and you wish you hadn't said it, but he was a troll. Anyway, how should we think about the things we are saying on here when we can really be broadcasting 24/7?
Well, look, defamation, when you say something about somebody else that's untrue, it harms them, it damages them, it hurts their business, that's magnified, that's amplified when you're doing it online. When you're doing it on live streaming, when you're doing it on Periscope, it can ruin lives, it can ruin businesses, and you can be held accountable. So I always tell people, practice the golden rule, think before you speak, and why say something negative about somebody else anyway, okay? You can block them, you can leave the Periscope, and that encourages other people to use Periscope because it's a friendly, welcoming environment. I'd like to see less trolls and less finger pointing and more content and more value.
That's really good, and I think it's also, the bigger ripple effect you make, the more the damages can be. And so if I say something bad about somebody else in front of just one other person, very limited damages, even if it's not true. If you're on Periscope and you're saying that to thousands of people, perhaps millions of people, there could be significant damages, and you could really be exposed there.
Well, just before we move on, this might not be as relevant to the individual in the room, but all the time, social media accounts for businesses make an oops. They're trying to be witty and quick and saying something and then they regret it. And we are seeing more and more brands periscoping from their own account. So I would assume the same is true there, and then maybe it's even amplified more because they're multi-billion-dollar corporations.
As far as making mistakes and how do you deal with them?
If they go live as,
own it.
Doritos or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to own the mistake and do the right thing. I think we have a culture, and I've seen this in litigation, we have a culture that's based upon forgiveness and understanding and second chances, and as long as you immediately own up to the mistake, I've seen cases disappear that otherwise wouldn't have, and I think the same thing applies to live streaming. It's not always easy to do, but I think it's always necessary to do. So that is a big problem, but I think it can be avoided as long as you're honest and transparent.
I think that's right. I think people get in the most trouble is when they hope it goes away, they bury their head in the sand, own up to it, apologize, it's warranted, and move on.
Okay, I just one more subject that I want to dive into to begin with, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of questions coming, and I want to make sure we have time for that. Might not be as long a line as the Periscope headquarters team earlier today, but it might get to the door. So I want to open up the floor. So get your questions ready for these guys. But, obviously there's the opportunity to do really exciting things on Periscope. Sometimes you could replace the word exciting, I guess, technically, with the word reckless. And so I would love to know what your legal brains think about all these issues that sometimes you see on Periscope and you're telling the people, I'm not sure if you should be doing that. Driving is probably the most obvious case, and maybe you can shed some legal perspective on the ramifications of that.
Absolutely. This is something that I'm very passionate about, and that's scoping and live streaming while driving. Please don't do it. If you're an influencer, please don't do it. What people don't realize is each year between 4,000 and 6,000 people are killed distracted driving. Each year between 400,000 and 600,000 people are injured because of distracted driving. And periscoping and live streaming while driving is distracted driving. Each second in the United States during daylight hours, there are over 600,000 people operating a motor vehicle with a smartphone in their hand. And that's not okay. and people are being killed, and we need to stop that. And as early as as most recently as this morning, I watched a very well-known scoper, who you all probably know, scoping and driving. And guys, we all need to work together to stop this before somebody in your family or somebody who lives on your street gets killed. So work with us. And real quick example. Distracted driving lasts about 5 seconds. At 5 seconds at 50 miles an hour, that's like traveling the length of a football field blindfolded. I don't care how good of a driver you are, don't drive and stream.
Okay, I'm going to open it. We'll keep chatting, but let's open the floor.
You can actually just come up and line up.
Dr. Cindy Brown here. I'm a psychotherapist and behavior specialist. So I do a lot of talks about sex, intimacy, relationships, late night. And I also did a live coaching session with Nicole Lopez, and we talk about some pretty sensitive subjects, sex, intimacy, molestation, things like that. And as a psychotherapist, can you just, or a healer, or anybody in the medical field, can you talk about confidentiality and what trouble I could get into? So I want to know about that.
Well, Cindy, since you know us, you're not going to get into trouble. We got your back. But it's interesting, the offline rules and regulations that control and dictate your profession and our profession, I think very easily apply online. Patient confidentiality, HIPAA, which is a privacy law with respect to your healthcare records. All of those things apply. So I think as long as you're speaking in generalities, you're probably okay. If you start, specifically naming who your patient is and what the exact problem is, which of course you're not doing, then that could be a problem. So.
And what about danger to self? Because I had a guy in that actually threatened suicide, and I know a lot of people don't have the skill to deal. We've had some people on Periscope talking about, killing themselves. I had a guy that came in and talked about that. He, was saying the methods he was going to use, different things like that, and all I did was I gave him resources. I talked about there was different things you could do. You can call me, you can DM me, but I know a lot of people don't know how to deal with that type of stuff. Can you speak on that?
My only thoughts would be, however you are, your state dictates how you need to handle that in your office. Once again, that's probably the protocol you should use when you're live streaming. It's on Periscope. And you need to be careful about giving advice out live, on any platform. Because if somebody relies upon your advice to their harm or detriment, it might unfortunately expose you to litigation.
So should I do a disclaimer at the beginning of mine saying I'm just, you have to use your own discretion or something? Because I do give out suggestions of different things.
I would absolutely use a disclaimer, and I would check with my local regulatory agency to see whether or not what you're doing is okay. I'm sure it is, but I do think you're unnecessarily exposing yourself. Now that's my opinion. Doug may have a different opinion.
It's the same, but I would even go a step further. The boxes that you would normally check in that situation, double check them, because you're more likely to get caught, right? So in any of those situations, if it's just a one-on-one conversation, something bad happens, you want to do that, especially when you're telecasting it out to thousands of people. If there's repercussions post-haste, it's going to turn up.
Because sometimes I talk about supplements for like depression and anxiety, and I say the disclaimer, you guys, these are just some of the things that I suggest my patients, but you need to do your, due diligence on, ask your doctor, talk to your doctor. So I kind of talk like that. Is that enough?
I think what you're doing sounds like an amazing service, okay, to help people. The reality of being a lawyer is sometimes you have to tell people what you think and not what they want to hear. And I know you're vested in this show. I think you're exposing yourself. So you want to be careful. So whatever what state do you practice in?
California.
So check with your California
Board of Behavioral Sciences.
Check with them and actually in detail get some type of written opinion or okay to do what you're doing.
Maybe you and I can scope on that and we'll put it out. I'll find out from my professional organization, you and I can scope it out.
As long as you don't ask me to give a legal opinion on Periscope.
Thank you, Cindy.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anaya, and I just wanted to talk, to speak about when it comes to music on Periscope. I think a lot of people don't understand. There are so many independent artists that would go crazy if you guys are playing their music in their scopes. So if you guys don't know what sites to go to, you guys can go to SoundCloud, you can go to Rhapsody, you can go to Spotify, you can go to Reverb Nation. And usually the information for all these artists is in there. And I'm telling you, I actually worked with I was an artist in Chicago, but then I did a digital catalog for my jewelry, and I reached out to an artist that agreed to be like, oh my God, your music would go great with this. She was thrilled. So what's going to happen is that artist is going to promote you, then their followers are going to promote you, and you have this whole new thing. You guys can probably do a partnership. So when you guys think about music, think about independent artists. I promise you, they will support you. Oh, that's right.
Gentlemen, my name is Kama Moiha. How you doing? Okay. So the question I have for you guys is kind of what you mentioned before about libel and slander, about open public forums like Periscope. I know it's not limited just to Periscope, it's everything. But my question is though, when people receive the information to say like, you Mitch, you slandered me, I don't like you. I send you a cease and desist, all detailed out and says, I'd like you to do this and redact whatever you said and send me confirmation of what you've done. But you're like, Kama, I still don't like you back. I'm not going to, one, sign for the envelope that I've sent you, nor publicly take back what I slandered. What repercussions do I have against you to follow through with those things?
So what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't go back online and confront that person on a public forum around the world, because that's what you're doing. What I would do is take it offline, either follow it up with another certified letter, FedEx, something like that, or contact a really, really good lawyer to step in and protect your rights and shut down the person that's slandering you. All right? I mean, there are things we can do that will absolutely keep somebody from harming you with any more untrue or defamatory statements. It has nothing to do with Periscope or live streaming.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
So I would not take it back online. I would take the high road and back away from Periscope and then communicate more traditional methods.
I guess the part you were is, what if there's still no follow-through? You mentioned avoided everything that I've tried to communicate with you, and FedEx, and I've even tried to somebody come over and drop a letter in your box.
It's easy, it's easy. I gotta tell you something. A letter from a lawyer with our letterhead on top,
right? It's
magical, man. You hire the right lawyer and send the right letter, and you will shut him down or her down instantly.
All right.
No, I was just going to say that the blocking feature has probably saved a lot of a lot more moments.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Wu, and I am your dating coach. So my question for you guys is, if I do some live coaching with men and women, and I want to capture them in a live video, for instance, but like standing from afar, can I do that, or can I not do that?
So are these your clients?
I have like guys and girls.
So what I'm thinking is it would be in your best interest to absolutely get written consent before doing anything like that. Now, having said that, if they're in a public place, and that's another big issue with live streaming right now, if any of us are in a public place, the question is, do we have a reasonable expectation of privacy? And the answer is we probably don't. So if you're sitting at a Starbucks and you're looking at them through the window with your camera, it raises all kinds of issues, and Dr. Brown's over here, so you could probably... No, but seriously, you want to be careful about that. But if you're in a public place, I think you probably do have the right to do that. Having said that, you'll probably lose them as your clients.
Is this a public place? Because I see a lot of people are... Because to me, this is not a public place, but a place that is tolerant of what we're doing. Because
I think, as far as I'm concerned, from what I just said, the reasonable expectation of privacy with people walking into this room understanding we're at a Periscope conference with everybody periscoping right now, I don't have any reasonable expectation of privacy. What do you think, Doug?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy.
Hi, my name is Kathy Nolan, known as Kathy Nolan Art, and I draw a lot on my scopes, like of celebrities and images. I do a lot of caricature work. So I had this interesting experience last fall where I drew somebody, they made some product out of it. They did ask for permission, but the artwork was altered, and so I dealt with it privately, everything's fine. And a lot of my followers will screenshot the artwork afterwards, which, you know, they screenshot it, and which is fine, I'm open to that, but then it was like, it's always in the back of my head, do I need to tell people up front I own the copyright because I created this? Like, I feel like it takes away the fun of the scope. But at the same time, I want to protect what I produce, and you know, I'm happy to work with partnerships like merchandising, licensing deals, or have people purchase the copyright. But or like even if I have somebody who wants to do business with me, here, sign this disclaimer form. Because Periscope is such a personable, in and out thing, and I have had experience with corporations ripping off my work, and that's where I'm coming from, just trying to be protected, but still approachable, and you know, it's a weird.
It's a good question.
Yeah, so I don't know how else.
And here's the thing: most of us do that. Most of us screenshot stuff, right?
Right.
And if somebody's screenshotting your work, you don't have to copyright it for you to have copyright rights. In other words, you don't need the C next to it. You don't need to tell the world that it's copyrighted. If you created it, then you're the owner of that copyright. The issue, I think, in today's world, things are changing legally. I think in today's world, because of live streaming, it would be your advantage maybe to reach out to that customer, let them know, wow, you know, I'm really honored that you screenshot my drawing. You know, it's copyrighted, but why don't we do this? Why don't you share it with your amazing audience, and then when they want to know who did it, send them back. And I think that's what you're doing. But technically, it's not okay.
Future with somebody I don't know, like that.
It's not okay. It's not okay.
I understand that, but like, you know, on Periscoping, you don't really know who pops in, and you know, they may not be a follower of yours or in your tribe. So that's where it sort of leads to this weird.
It's not weird. It's a violation of your rights, and you have the right to pursue a claim against them if you want to.
Right. So every scope, I should, like, how do you educate people about this sort of thing in that context?
I lived in Venice Beach, and there's beautiful artwork there done, and people constantly taking pictures, and all the artists know those pictures are probably going on Instagram that minute. And a lot of times what they end up saying is, I get it, I see what you're doing, could you just take my card too? And you know, they try to just acknowledge it, I think is one thing, which seems actually fairly effective for them. Then they
so maybe I could say, if you screenshot this, just put my Twitter handle next to it. Is that?
I think it's you have some default copyright rights just by creating the images. You can also get a copyright. And the big difference there is that you then have statutory damages. And so the problem with not getting a copyright on these images is that you have to prove damages if you wanted to go after them, which can be very difficult to do. What are those damages unless they're printing out thousands of t-shirts with your images on it?
But that's
and so, and the filing fee is relatively minimal for getting a copyright, and not doing it for every single image you do, but being strategic on the ones that you think really might have some legs and some commercial purpose, and paying that $35 or $50 to get that copyright. And you know, getting a copyright on the images you think are most likely to be infringed on, and then you got some teeth, you know, if they're really infringing on that mark, to go after some statutory damages.
But the other thing is finding out, you know, you may do a live scope or do a photography scope or whatever, you create something, and unless you talk to other scopers, how would you even know? That's the other question. Second part of the question.
And we should probably move on just to give everybody else a chance to.
No, but you're right. There are new challenges that we're all trying to figure out together. Okay, so you recognize the challenges. So you need, the next time you Periscope, you need to decide, do you want to do it or not?
Got it.
Okay, but yeah, things are changing quickly, but it's also an exciting time for opportunity.
It is.
So good luck with everybody.
Thank you very much.
All right.
All right. My name is Julie Alba. I'm editor of Wedding Market. My community of wedding professionals, they scope weddings, just like they would be in this room. A lot of times there's DJs, there's bands, and then they might be streaming people that are at that wedding, but they necessarily do not have permission. And I know you mentioned a little bit about this earlier, but I want to make sure my wedding community hears this from you on your recommendations.
Oh, my recommendation. On Doug's recommendations. Look, there's a new frontier, and unless you've got express permission from people that you're videotaping, a wedding might be considered a non-public venue. You probably don't have permission to do that. It could cause problems. Once again, it may not be what you want to hear, but it's what I think. And it probably depends on the state that you're in. The laws in each state are different, so you want to be cognizant of what the laws are of your state. I would suggest if you get the bride and groom's written permission to live stream their wedding and put the burden on them to invited guests who come to our wedding are consenting to us live streaming this very special day with our people we care about for the rest of our lives, that might help satisfy any legal issues you might have. Is that vague enough for you?
Yeah, so it sounds like to me you're saying just put it in your contract that the bride and groom.
I assume, yeah, you need that in your contract. That was an assumption. I thought you already had something in there.
Well, believe me, since this is so new, I know our wedding professionals probably do not have something about live streaming in their contract because it's so new.
All photography, all video, all live streaming, I would have something like that in your contract. It's a good question.
I'd go even a step further. In that contract, in addition to the consent, have indemnification provision in there that essentially says, hey, look, if I'm sued as the person doing the videography here by one of your guests, you're going to step in and defend myself. And you're going to cover my legal expenses, any sort of damages. And so if you're doing a contract with the bride and groom, that's another provision I think would be key to having that in there.
I hope you don't mind, but I have one other.
You don't need to do it for 24 hours.
Great question, Sal. See us afterwards, okay?
Yeah. So we have a bunch of people left to go. If everyone keeps it to one question without a follow-up, we'll be sure to fit everybody in. Okay?
Hi, I'm Michelle Hayward, and I spoke about leaving my corporate job to become an entrepreneur. I'm an engineer, and as an engineer, what engineering societies have noticed, which is probably what we're coming across in live stream, is legislation is light years behind where they need to be in comparison to engineering and technology. As a community, which is what Periscope is, how do we each need to come together and look at what our legislation is that is so far behind that they're developing, or we're helping them create laws that are really more fair, and it really draws attention and looks at and studies the technology as it is currently and as it is being developed.
Yeah, that's the most exciting thing about being a lawyer is things change, and when things change, the laws need to change. The laws need to change to accommodate what's happening in our world. And what I would suggest is contact your local senators, congressmen, assembly people, legislatures, things like that, because they don't know what's going on.
Oh, they don't know anything.
Well,
So
that's a different panel for another time.
I know, but generally speaking, the technical people or the people who study that are part of their team. How do we go about being on boards and so forth so that we can steer it to you really need to be focusing on some of your time on this because we're so far behind?
And I think we need to lead by example. Okay, we all need to lead by example, do the right thing, practice the golden rule, and the laws will start to follow. I will tell you, and Doug can probably tell you the same thing, in trial, we're using social media. What's posted on a Facebook wall, what's posted on Twitter all the time now. Somebody takes a stand and says one thing, we bring up their Facebook wall and it's completely different. So the point being is, it is an issue and it's evolving and changing, and let's all work on making it better. We're on it. Good question.
Thank you. And by the way, shout out to my Congressman Ted Lieu, who has come on Parachute TV many times, and he loves it. I think if you honestly reach out to lawmakers and tell them about Periscope, they'll figure it out real quick.
How you doing? My name is DJ Baby Fox on Periscope. I DJ scopes that I play copyrighted music? Do I have to worry about that? And also with Julie, she says she scopes weddings. Does she have to worry about the music that's being played in the background?
My answer, and we'll see what Doug has to say, I think that's a big problem. I'm sorry to tell you. I don't think you can play other people's music on Periscope without their permission, or unless it falls under one of several exceptions. Being a DJ is not one of those exceptions.
Okay.
I think it's a perfect example of an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure. And there's so many talented artists out there that would love to have you promoting their music. And so I would think about targeting them. And it was mentioned earlier by one of the question answers.
Yeah.
You know, you get them to be your advocates. And next thing you know, instead of coming after you and trying to harm you, they're trying to promote you and your channel.
You know, keep in mind, this is a new platform. It's less than a year old, so we're all struggling through these challenges together. Great idea what you're doing, but in hindsight, I'm thinking to myself, it's probably not okay to do. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Hi guys, thanks. This is a great topic. This is on slander and the liability of that. My name is Eric Triplett from The Pond Digger. That's my Periscope channel. And on Facebook, I was entered into a group as a moderator, and then the guy who created the group leaves. And I was just in there. I didn't even really understand that I was the moderator. He leaves. Some slander starts happening. So then the person comes after me, threatens me with a lawsuit because I was the moderator of the group. And so I was like, well, how did this happen, right? So that's been solved, that's fine, but my question now becomes, you know, as the comments are coming up on Periscope, they come very rapidly, and you can't catch them all. So what happens when slander starts happening in between that and you're the moderator because it's your Periscope?
Great question. I mean, if I understand your question, it's the same answer that I gave earlier, okay? You know, blocking people is a good tool. Just make sure you're not the one saying something in a defamatory way against another person or another company. If people are in your chat slandering each other, defaming each other, really that's kind of their gig, not yours. You're not encouraging it, you're not promoting it. In fact, when you see that, you're reminding everybody, guys, this is not what my scope's all about.
I would definitely tell them to chill out, but I mean, sometimes you don't see stuff because it happens really fast.
Yeah, so that sounds to me like it's more of an issue of the people participating in the chat. If you slander somebody in a chat, you could be held liable. It doesn't necessarily bring the fall back on your shoulders.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Darcy. My handle is Darcy Network. I spoke about a bunch of things, but I have a question because it's obviously a mobile platform. You've often mentioned about check with your state. It's an international, you know, like I live in Las Vegas, but I'm in California right now. So, you know, what international and what travel, how do laws apply and so forth?
You know, I'd be worried about what state you're actually doing the periscoping in. You know, there's a nexus there, you've got feet on the ground there, but I'd be less worried about some other part of the world suing you because they're viewing it in some other part of the world.
Okay, so while I'm scoping in California, I apply to the California laws, and if I'm in China, I apply to the China laws.
What we were talking about earlier was Dr. Brown's profession, a particular profession being regulated, and your question kind of lends itself to something more broad. You're here in California, but what if somebody in New York relies upon your representation or buys your products and services? Some things we didn't talk about is if you're using Periscope to consult, to sell product, to sell services, I think it's a really good idea that you have some type of written agreement that you enter into, whether it's email, whether it's traditional snail mail, that says the venue. If anything happens, if there are any disagreements, we agree that all matters will be resolved in the state of California. It's called a venue clause. An indemnity clause, like Doug mentioned earlier, is a really good clause to have in all of your agreements, especially when you're live streaming, so that if somebody does something wrong and it's not your fault, you can ask them to reimburse you in a court of law. Okay, it's called an indemnity clause. So you have to understand, when you press the live button, even though you're in one state, you may be subjecting yourself to it's called jurisdiction, in personam jurisdiction in another state. And so you want to make sure that you're very careful with selling products and services online. And a venue clause is a great clause to have to make sure that if there are any issues, you don't have to travel all the way to New York to defend yourself. Does that make sense?
That's a lot over my head still, but I can really hear it and learn it.
This is not exactly what you're talking about, but I will say certainly I know, because I used to live here in San Francisco, the chief of police here, Greg Scher, is very social media savvy. And when people are doing things like when the Giants win and get a little rowdy out there, they are watching and keeping an eye on people. So a little food for thought when you've had a few too many and you go out scope, just to be careful what you're doing. Not that I'm suggesting that you do. Anyway, should we keep the questions going just to keep, yeah. We're out of time, okay.
Do you want to go 5 minutes over? We can probably finish everybody.
I'm sure these guys will.
Yeah?
Cool.
So no more questions after the 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Lou Altman, Next Level Lou. Everybody follow me because I'm trying to get to 250 followers before the end of the video. Please, Next Level Lou, thank you. Hey, what if the slander is true? No, that's not what I wanted to ask. My business is coaching other businesses in profitability, and there's some very specific tools and exercises and techniques that I use. And when I scope, I'll offer, sort of the tip of the iceberg. Here's a little bit of this, and a little bit of this, and a little bit of this. And now you can it's enough to put together an action plan. But if you do it wrong, you can screw up your business. If I sort of put out the disclaimer that this is what works for me, if you want more help, call me. But if they just go off on their own and take what I've given them and they go off the cliff, am I liable?
So the disclaimer law is different in each state. So it depends on what state you are. You need to find out what the law is. Disclaimer is always good. I will say that if you're giving out advice and it's interpreted as being negligent advice, incorrect or wrong advice, and somebody relies upon it, then yes, I think somebody can come after you for it. And deservingly so. So just be careful.
That's why I do my best not to give out bad advice.
Go then, you're okay.
Then I'm good.
You're good. Thank you. Good question.
Hello guys, I'm Arvin Poole. I'm better known as Perry Hacker on Periscope. So I work with a lot of tribes and communities who actually use the word Perry and scope in their names. Can you talk on that and how that could actually maybe be a possible infringement?
Yeah, sure. So we're kind of getting into trademark law there, and the legal test is likelihood of customer confusion. And so the risk there is that those tribes use Periscope, and Periscope claims that there could be a likelihood of confusion, that they're the ones promoting that particular product, those particular ideas. And so there is a risk there. We've seen it recently with a client that was renting out. I'm trying to think about how much I can tell. They're renting out a particular type of vehicle, and that's right. And that vehicle name was in their company name, right? And that vehicle company came after them and said that there's a likelihood of customer confusion that we would be confused to be the ones renting out these cars. And so if you don't stop using our name, we're going to sue you for trademark infringement. And so I think anytime you use any company name, whether it's Periscope, whether it's Coca-Cola, and there can be confusion that they're behind that product, behind that idea. There's a risk there.
We're going to keep it moving. Just bring it to some final questions, and thank you.
Hi, I'm Nicole. Your name, Nicole, and I generally talk lifestyle, beauty, cooking, things like that. But because Periscope is kind of getting into all areas of my life, I have like 20 years of rental property management experience, just that I always on the side with my real job and that kind of stuff. And if I start talking about that, I'm not a realtor or anything, and if people ask me questions about that, and I answer from my understanding what has worked, and I do everything through California Apartment Association, all that, can I get in trouble on that, or should I just avoid that subject?
So I actually have a realtor license as well, a real estate license.
I don't.
I do as well. And so, as far as in California, if you're real estate, once you cross, you're okay until you cross the line of actually practicing real estate activities, and so you really want to, if you're going to get into that space, really have a good idea of where that line is and where you can walk right up to it, but not be crossing over to the point where you need a license for giving that advice.
So avoid.
We did it! We got to our final question. All right!
Okay, so it's a little talk. Okay, so hi guys, my name is Jane Green on Periscope, and I'm the cannabis industry insider. And I'm the person that is I'm an advocate and consultant in the cannabis industry, and I want to know how I can give out information, educate others, but still protect myself and make sure that I'm not, breaking any laws.
So are you a corporation or LLC like we talked about?
I am a corporation.
Okay, so just make sure when you go live that you let your audience know that you're, going live on behalf of the XYZ company, number one, that's huge.
Okay.
And then let people know that you're just simply sharing advice. Okay, I'm sharing advice based upon my research, based upon what my company does. This is what I think you ought to do. That's okay to do.
Okay.
But you want to be careful, depending on the subject matter.
Okay. Any type of disclaimer should I give in the beginning?
Well, look, I think it's always, disclaimers oftentimes aren't going to be as powerful as you hope that they will be. So I don't think that's the cure-all for everything. But I think if you let people know, this is an opinion that I have, it's on behalf of my company, it may be different in your state. Once again, you might be broadcasting globally. So you need to let people know they need to check with an expert in their state before taking any action. That's what I would do.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank these guys right now.